Hello, everyone. This is Invisible Connections. I'm your host, Sandra Dorenzi, and today we are going to be talking about autoimmune conditions. Now, I'm going to be honest in this beginning part before we even go into it. So the first thing I want to mention, I don't think I have a lot of kid viewers, but I want to mention that one of these autoimmune conditions has to do with the menstrual cycle, and if you have not had the talk with your child, I would say that they probably should not listen to this podcast. But yeah, just wanted to put that warning out there. The other thing as well I want to say is that I do not claim to be a doctor at all. I wanted to also put that in the beginning as well. I am only speaking out of experience as I have these two autoimmune illnesses. And lastly, I wanted to say why this would count as an invisible challenge. A lot of people would probably ask why an autoimmune condition would, or, both autoimmune conditions that I'm going to talk about, why they would count as an invisible challenge. Both of these autoimmune conditions you cannot see with the naked eye. You cannot tell if someone has it by looking at them. Therefore, I would constitute it as an invisible challenge. So, I have both of these, and I'm only speaking out of my experience having both of these conditions. So, we are going to start. The first condition we're going to talk about is endometriosis. Now, this is the same as my other podcast episodes. I pulled questions from Quora, and I'm just going to answer them about each condition. The first half of this podcast will be about endometriosis. The second half will be about Sjogrens, which I have both. So we're going to get started. What is endometriosis? So endometriosis is when the endometrial tissue grows on the outside of the uterus. This actually roughly affects about 10% of women each year. Yeah, one of the things that I would like to see change about this condition is it's not talked about very much at all. It's kind of seen as taboo because it has to do with a woman's period. I don't see it as taboo, and I think we need to talk about it more, which is why I'm bringing it up on this podcast. I was happy to learn that we were learning about it in sociology in college, which was nice. We had a section where we talked about it, and I think it's really important to inform people about this condition. I feel like it should be talked about in schools as well, like in high school, not just college, when you're learning about, when you're having the sex talk, when you're learning about stuff like that in health. I think they should bring up conditions like this. It's important to bring people's awareness to it. The other reason I think it's less talked about is because it's a women's issue. Men don't necessarily have to deal with it because men don't have uteruses, so they don't talk about it as much, and I think it's really important that we bring these things to light. Okay, which organs does endometriosis affect? So, I don't feel comfortable answering this question in full by listing everything because endometriosis affects everybody differently. I know for me, I had it mainly just in the usual spots, which are like around the uterus, the ovaries, like kind of in that area. But some people have found, doctors have found it in some people in their bladder. There was actually someone I talked to who had it even in their lungs, and it all just depends. It's kind of crazy. It really depends on the person. Now, the lungs is like the rarer case. Most of the time it is like around your uterus or stomach, because the stomach, is near it, or the bladder. Just like organs that are near the uterus is mostly where it is in most cases. But there are cases that are unusual. There are stage 4. There's different stages like most diseases, and it all just depends on the person. Okay, we're going to talk about our next question. I just wanted to preview the other questions. Yeah, I'm going to discuss my own personal story near the fourth question. The next question I want to address is, what are the symptoms of endometriosis? So, again, I'm not a doctor, and the symptoms are different in everybody. But most of the time, you can expect to have cramps in the lower abdomen, back, and pelvis, abnormal menstruation causing anemia sometimes, and gastrointestinal issues. Because again, the uterus is near those gastrointestinal organs. Now, for me, I mainly struggled with the cramps. Like, I had such excruciating pain, and that's what it really is. It feels like there's no other feeling to describe it other than it feels like you're being stabbed. And it's tough. And in your developmental years, one of the things I had is I got my period very early. Very, very early. Everybody gets it at a different time, but that's actually very common with endometriosis. I found out later that you can get your period very, very early. The other thing that can happen that's difficult to deal with is, again, that excruciating pain and abnormal amounts of bleeding as well, which is what causes anemia. Now, I actually had a really, really bad time about sophomore year of high school. And I remember one night the pain was so bad that we went to the emergency room. And, of course, they couldn't really do anything because you can only find it through surgery. So they just were checking if I had anemia, which I didn't, but I was very, very pale. And they ended up sending me home. And I ended up getting the surgery, I think, in February of that year, and I was in the ER November. So, yeah, definitely tough. And that leads us to our next question. I might be going through this a little too fast, but our next question is, how does endometriosis impact a person's quality of life? So I'm going to talk about this from the standpoint of my story. I was 16 when I learned that I had endometriosis, and I will say it was very, very difficult. So I'll take you back to when I first noticed abnormal menstruation. This really started, I would say, beginning of middle school. I think it was I got my first period beginning of middle school, and it just kept getting heavier and heavier, and by the time I was in 8th grade, it just started to become a pain. So they prescribed me with treatment, and for treatment, they prescribe it to you before they think you have endometriosis to see if it's going to do anything. So this is actually birth control. They prescribe you with birth control, like the pill. And they give you the lowest dose first to see what happens. And then they slowly up the dosage as needed until you feel better. So they kept upping it, and it was not doing anything for me. And by the time I was in high school, it was just getting worse and worse. And by my sophomore year, I barely had gone to school. I got the letter that said, you've missed more than 10 days of school. What are you going to do? And so that was something that was difficult for me. But of course, I still didn't know what was happening at the time, because doctors can't diagnose it unless they do a laparoscopy, which is a surgery where they do incisions in your stomach, and they go in with the device that has a camera on the end of it, and basically look for endometrial tissue that's not where it's supposed to be, and then they burn it off. But they try to delay the surgery as much as possible because, of course, you don't want to do incisions on a person that young unless you absolutely need to. So they delayed it. They gave me different forms of birth control. And then I had that ER visit, and at the time, the place I was at, like the OBGYN I was with, we tried to call to see if I could get in, and they were like, yeah, you can't get in until like January. And my mom was like, are you kidding me? She was just in the ER, like, we need to get in. And so they didn't have an appointment available. We had to switch doctors, and that was the whole thing. We finally switched doctors. I kind of explained what was happening, and they ended up deciding that the surgery would be best after, I think, maybe like a month or so. And then we had the surgery. Now, I remember before the surgery, I was terrified. I was like, what if this is not endometriosis? Then what is it? Am I dying? Like, what's happening? That's what you think. You think you're dying because the pain is... And look, I am one... Many people will say I have a very high tolerance of pain. But the pain that endometriosis causes, I mean, it's really excruciating at times. And so, yeah, it was difficult, and I was scared. I was like, what's going to happen if they don't find anything? And my mom was like, they're going to find it. And the reason she was so sure is because endometriosis is actually genetic. So if a parent has it, you're more likely to have it. And my mom got diagnosed with it. So I knew that I had the chance of having it, and it's tough to deal with. And also, it was hard to come to terms with the fact that the risks that come with it. Now, luckily, mine was caught very early. However, if it, if I didn't have my mom, it could have not been caught early because my mom pushed for them to do the surgery as well. And the other thing that's difficult about this too, a lot of women get diagnosed with it after trying to have kids and not being successful because it causes infertility. It causes complications. If you end up getting pregnant, like, your risks are just higher. And so that was the other fact I had to live with. Not only did I have a disease that could not be cured, but also my risks for whenever I want to have a family, which I do, they're much higher than a typical person. But luckily, we caught it early, so my chances of having kids were better than the norm. Most times, again, women don't find out until they're in their 30s, which is a huge problem. And that's why I'm saying we need to talk about it more. We need to talk about it more, and doctors need to acknowledge it. Because the other thing, too, is the medical field. I mean, there are so many people who I watched after finding out that I had it that had bad experiences with doctors who wrote them off and told them that they just were having bad periods, or this pain is normal, or, you should just suck it up, or, stuff like that. Doctors should not be saying that if they don't know what's going on. And I think it's sad that we live in a time where that's happening. Now, I think as we become educated, we're becoming better. Just like how I said in my last podcast about how we're getting better with being more educated about autism and autistic rights. I think the same thing can be said for endometriosis. I think as we get more educated, doctors and the medical field are hopefully getting better. I'm hoping. I'm not speaking for everybody. But I did eventually change offices again because I will say the doctor that I had, I came in for a follow-up visit. She forgot what medication I was on. She forgot all this stuff. She forgot what medication I was on. She had to do, the unfortunate the regular annual exam that, women have to get. Yeah, I had to get that earlier, and she had to do that because I was having an episode of endometriosis, and we needed to make sure it was nothing else. And she didn't like the fact that it was painful for me, which I'm like, it's, an exam. It's not comfortable. Like, that's normal. So there's all this taboo and shame around endometriosis. And again, I think it's easy for people to listen to this podcast and say, ew, disgusting, gross, She's talking about menstruation. She's talking about the exam. She's talking about all this stuff. But the truth is, for those of you who are thinking that, I want you to ask yourself a question. Because again, I did put a warning at the beginning. And I want you to ask yourself a question. How are we going to move forward in talking more about this issue so that women can get treatment if we're too grossed out to talk about this issue? We have to get to a point where we can talk about this issue freely and openly. And that's what I'm pushing for, is for us to talk about it. But yeah, I had a not good experience with a doctor, and then I ended up switching. And honestly, now I'm a little bit in a better place. But even after my surgery, I got put on Depo-Provera. I don't know if other people have had experiences with the shot who are watching this. That's what it's commonly called. I did not have good experiences near the end of my time using it. And so I actually switched back to the pill, which a lot of people don't do. You normally don't go from a high dose of birth control to a lower dose of birth control. But I did it because I felt like I needed to. I felt like the medication was too high dose. I was having menopausal-like symptoms, which can happen with Depo-Provera. And I just did not like it. Like, I would get hot flashes. That's what I mean by menopausal-like symptoms. Like, I get all that kind of stuff. And I hated it. And so the new doctor's office I'm going to, they switched me off of it. They switched me back to the pill. And that's what I'm taking now. And it's working for me great. I've been taking it since the summer of 2023. And it's working for me. So that's what matters. And so I think you got to find what works for you, and every story is different. That's my personal experience. It has a huge impact on your life. I, at the time before the surgery, could not do anything. I slept most of the time. I was too tired, because when your body is on like that and fighting something like that and there's inflammation all over, you don't have the energy. Most of the time I slept. And there were a couple of hours of the day where I was up, but I almost felt like a broken machine. Like, the machine where you put the battery in and it sucks it up and then it's dead. The battery's dead. That's what would happen. I would wake up. I'd only be up for a few hours at a time, and I'd feel like exhausted. I'd feel like, my batteries were out, and I would go to sleep. And so when I was having really, really bad days, I couldn't go to school. And I could barely do schoolwork. Now, because I've pushed through very hard times, I still passed my classes. I barely passed geometry, but I did. I made it work. So you can push through, but it's very, very difficult. And so I think that we should have good accommodations for people who struggle with autoimmune illness. And by the way, endometriosis does count as an autoimmune disease. That's not talked about very much, but it does. Okay. How can we push towards coming up with a cure for endometriosis? So again, I think we need schools to discuss this. We need to normalize talking about this disease. It shouldn't be taboo because it's a women's issue. We should talk about it. The other thing as well that we want to do, I think, erasing the stigma. And I think this is starting to happen a lot in places like the UK. I see a lot of campaigns and things going on in the UK about endometriosis. By the way, you guys, just so you know, endometriosis is actually represented by the yellow ribbon. I know there's other stuff that's the yellow ribbon, but endometriosis also is. The other thing too, just because I'm on a good treatment, I want to also remind people that endometriosis does not yet have a cure either. So it actually can grow back within a year of laparoscopy surgery. So, it's very possible that I already have had some that's growing back. There's other people who might have some that's grown back. So it's it's not a cure at all, by any means. So I think that's important to discuss, and it's just, we need to be more open about this topic. I know we've been a lot more open about a lot more things in my generation, but I think this is one that definitely needs to be more discussed. There are actually stories I've heard of women who have died because of endometriosis, indirectly. There was one story I heard in sociology class about this woman who had endometriosis, and she was mowing the lawn one day. So she was on a lawnmower, and she passed out because of the amount of blood loss, and that lawnmower went to the road because she was passed out, and a car ran it over. So these are things that can happen from just lack of treatment. I mean, who's to say this woman didn't go to the doctor and the doctor just said, oh, you have a painful period, we're going to send you home. So these are important things to remember. And it's a difficult conversation to have, but it has to be had, and women deserve a lot better. So I definitely wanted to talk about this issue on my podcast, and it's just an important thing to discuss. The more we talk about it, the more we research it, the more we educate ourselves, the better. And it also will help women themselves identify these things. If I didn't have my mom, I probably wouldn't have known what endometriosis even was, and I wouldn't have identified it and advocated to have the surgery, which at the time I was a minor, so I had my mom, and she advocated for me, but I probably wouldn't have even known. So it's so important. I can't even begin to express how important education is, and it's important for other women to know what's happening to their bodies so they can advocate for themselves. The sooner we identify it, the better, because a lot of the time this is left untreated, and then women find out that they can't have kids. Women don't deserve that. They should be able to treat it before it becomes an infertility issue. And, the sooner you treat it, the better. But in order to treat it sooner, women have to know what to look for. So, one thing I will say before we move to our GoFundMe commercial. If any of you here that are women have abnormal cramping, excessive bleeding, and just any of the symptoms that were listed for endometriosis, I urge you, really push. You might have to push your doctor. You might have to say, look, this is what I have. I need this surgery. Not I need. I need this surgery. I'm correcting myself. You got to push for your needs, and you definitely need it if you have any of those symptoms and access. And talk to your healthcare provider, and I hope for a day where women can get exactly the care that they need, and that this issue can be something of the past that we can talk about. Maybe we won't have a cure, but maybe we can have better treatments for it. So that is it for endometriosis. Those are the 5 questions I had. So now I'm going to talk about Teamwork Wins. As you all know, I'm the board secretary of Teamwork Wins. It's a job I enjoy a lot. And so we are launching our GoFundMe because we are creating new programs. And the one I'm creating is going to help with the autism unemployment rate. Now, obviously, it's still in the works. I don't have it completely done yet. This is my first time ever creating a program, so I'm really excited about it. But it's supposed to help businesses understand autism, and it's supposed to help autistics to become employed with businesses who will be accommodating to them. And also it helps them to be job ready, so resume building skills and just things like that. Those are the plans so far, and again, they're still in the works. But it's something I really want to do, and so we have a little trailer here that talks about it.
My name's Adele Saccarelli Cavallero. I'm the founder and executive director of this wonderful organization, a foundation for awareness and change. And it's dear to my heart.
I'm Gail Kirshner, and I'm the executive co-director.
I am Sandy Dorenzi, and I am the board secretary.
Hey, is Teamwork Win still running? Well, we're on hiatus for a little bit. Or, no, during COVID, we had to stop a little bit. Over the years, I have received phone calls from people that have attended our camps, and now they're in college and in the workplace. And I talk to these people that have attended the programs. They're always so excited, and they express such great gratitude about what they learned here. Our staff and our volunteers just were miraculous. I know that sounds a little out there, but they really were. They changed lives.
Our new focus with our programs is with 3 different underserved populations. One is underserved youth who are at high risk for getting into trouble, having difficulty in school, and not being happy and successful. We also want to work with youth who have parents in prison, and we also want to work with ex-offenders who are trying diligently to turn their life around, but need additional support because of their invisible challenges.
I would really like to create a program for raising awareness and educating workplaces about the autism spectrum and hiring employees, as well as trying to spread education to workplaces about autism. I'm hoping to also help one-on-one in order to help them find employment opportunity. One of the other things I want to do is make one of these programs virtual, still in the works, but I think it would be really cool because then people from all around the world or different parts of the United States and different time zones would be able to join.
We have a lot to do about awareness and change. Our organization is really about looking at the perceptions as children, sometimes misperceptions, sometimes stories that we told as children, and kind of clearing them up, undoing those beliefs about ourselves that aren't so nice. And I hope you come join us. See you soon.
So that was Teamwork Wins, and we are also, as you heard, working on programs to help the prison system. That is something that Gail is doing, and yeah, so definitely if those things resonate with you, the GoFundMe is in the description. As well as that, if you are unable to donate, please share this to your friends. The more people we can get to click the share button, the more people we can get to share the GoFundMe, the better, and the more around it's going to go. Now, I will say, people have told me that on Facebook that the share button doesn't appear for the GoFundMe video. Unfortunately, I think that's a new change that they did, and I cannot get the share button to appear. So I will have the link to the GoFundMe in the description, and I will also have the Teamwork Wins website in the description. Please share the information, even if it's, just the Teamwork Wins website. I think that would be good, just so we can get the word out there. That's really something that we want to do, is get the word out there as much as possible. So please donate or share and help. And it's an amazing place. Adele ran one of the camps that I went to, and as I said, I am forever grateful, and I cannot even describe on here how helpful it was for me. But yeah, so we are going to move on to the second half of this podcast, and that is about Sjogrens. So, I was diagnosed with Sjogrens December of 2023, and I will talk a bit about my story, but before I do, I want to answer our first question, which is, what is Sjogrens? So Sjogrens is an autoimmune illness that causes dry eye and dry mouth. Basically what happens, And I'm saying this from my own education. I didn't pull this from a website, but my doctor described to me what it was. Basically, what it is your own cells in your body, or your own body mistakes the gland in your eyes and your salivary gland as being foreign, and it ends up attacking them, so your own body attacks your own body. And so Sjogren's goes for a lot of moisture producing glands. So even though most people say it's just the eyes and the mouth, it can also affect other parts of the body. For me, it also affected my skin too, and a lot of other things. And my skin might not appear dry, but that's because I have a very, very, very long, face routine in the morning. I do my serums and everything. So yeah, it definitely can affect multiple parts of your body. And the other thing that I heard is if you have one autoimmune illness, you are very likely to have another autoimmune illness. Like, once you have one, it's like, your body's like, gotta catch them all. Anyway. But yeah, so that's what Sjogren's is. It can also affect your joints, and it can also affect other parts of your body. My diagnosis story. So I ended up having my first side effects, of course, on the first day of me teaching in the fall. And I was like, are you kidding me? It was everywhere. So I ended up getting hives, and I thought I was having an allergic reaction all over. Like, it started kind of like on my neck a little bit, and it was getting really close to my throat, and everyone was getting nervous. They're like, we really want you to go to urgent care. Like, we need to make sure this isn't an emergency. So I ended up driving myself to urgent care that day, because the middle school director was like, yeah, you need to go get this checked out. Let's make sure it's not an emergency. So I went, and of course they diagnosed me with dermatitis, which, for those of you who don't know what that means, it's literally just any skin condition that is not normal. So didn't help me pinpoint it at all, but they did give me steroids to treat it. I hate being on steroids, but I had to treat it because it would not clear up on its own. And it just kept getting worse before it got better. Like, it started on my neck, and then it went all over my arms, all over my legs, all over my face. It was horrible. So I got home. I was like, this has to be an allergic reaction, which I've never had before. I thought I maybe had a new allergy, because that can happen. And I haven't been allergy tested since I was little. So I went to my allergist. Well, I went to my brother's allergist because my brother has allergies. And she did a test, and everything came back negative. But she also did a blood test. Well, come to find out, the blood test came back with my ANA being abnormal. For those of you who don't know, that's antibodies count, which, if your antibodies are abnormal, it normally indicates some sort of autoimmune illness. So she was describing that to me, and she said, you need to see a rheumatologist. Now, before I went to go see a rheumatologist, I actually saw my general doctor, because he was very good at investigating things. And I actually switched to a different general doctor, is what I'm saying, and that's who I saw, because my other general doctor was out of practice, and there was another person that replaced him who people went to. And my dad had this other general doctor that I knew was really good, so I switched because he was also closer to the area we lived in. And he ran a couple blood tests as well. That's the thing with autoimmune illness. You got to run like 50 million blood tests. So my antibody count was still coming back abnormally high, which, it wasn't like it was elevated by a couple points, which can happen to other people, but no, this was like I think the threshold was like 300 or something like that. Like 1 to 300 is like normal. Mine was like 1,000. Like, it was just as far up as it could go, like as the test could go. So we ran a couple of tests. we couldn't figure out what it was at all, which is generally the case with autoimmune illnesses. What we found is that my rheumatoid factor was off, my thyroid counts were off, like there were lots of things that were off. So we just kept running, test after test, and so my thyroid kept coming back abnormal, so we thought maybe it was something with my thyroid. So what did we do? He ordered a thyroid uptake and scan. For any of you who have ever gotten that test, I absolutely hate it. So for that test, you have to go on a diet. You cannot have regular salt. You can have kosher salt, but you can't have regular salt. It's for the scan. It messes up the scan if you do. You can't have iodine. So that means no sushi, no seaweed, nothing like that. No fish, no salt. So I got kosher salt instead. But a lot of the stuff I had was sweet, just so I could avoid the salt. Like, I did a lot of baked oats and things like that until I got the test, and I hated it, but it was necessary. Well, unfortunately, that didn't point us in the right direction because that came back normal. But it was fortunate it came back normal. I'm happy that there was nothing wrong, but it wasn't pointing us in the right direction. Now we're getting to November. I'm getting frustrated because I'm having all these side effects. I was having joint pain, but no swelling. So, it wasn't rheumatoid arthritis. Even though my rheumatoid factor was off and I had rheumatoid arthritis in my family, it was not rheumatoid. And I was like, oh, what is it? I can't figure it out. I had dry eyes as well, but I thought maybe it was just allergies or something like that. I didn't know about Sjogren's at the time. I also didn't test positive for it, so I thought, it can't be Sjogren's. I didn't test positive for it. So we kept running test after test, and finally there was a test where I tested positive for Sjogren's. It was the 5th or 6th blood test, and I think that was late November, early December. So my rheumatologist said, okay, you said you had dry eye. I think you should go to an ophthalmologist and they should run a Schwimmer test, which was for Sjogren's. But there was one other thing I'm pretty sure I tested positive for, so I had to go get that tested as well to make sure that that wasn't what I had. I don't remember what disease it was that I tested positive for. Let me mention in this, you can test positive for things that you do not have. I could test positive for rheumatoid arthritis in my blood, but I might not have the swelling or anything like that. So your symptoms have to match with your blood test. So I had the Sjogren's positive antibody. I went to the ophthalmologist. They had to do those stupid dilation drops. And I know that sounds like I'm being mean, but I hate those dilation drops. I hate them. But they had to do it. They got to put them in, and they put a little film in between your eye, and you close your eye. This measures the amount of tears that you produce. And if you don't produce a lot of tears, then you test positive for Sjogren's. So, funny enough, I didn't produce tears. Or if I did, it was a very low amount. And the lady was like, yeah, you have Sjogren's, which at that point, I wanted to jump up and down. And a lot of people listening to this are probably like, well, why? You don't want an autoimmune illness. But when you literally feel so off your game and you're trying to explain to people that something's wrong and you can't prove it, it makes you feel crazy. And I just wanted an answer as to why I was feeling so under the weather all the time. So I got my answer. It was Sjogren's. And after I got my answer, they said, well, since we did the dilation drops on you, you gotta wear these sunglasses. And I remember I actually got lost because the doctor's office was in Lansdale and I lived in Royersford. For those of you who don't know, it's a half an hour drive. And I didn't remember how to get back home. And I couldn't pull up the map because when they do dilation drops, you can see far away. Like, and you could see enough to drive. But anytime you put something close to your face, you can't see it. It's blurry. So I couldn't see the map to get home. And so I was like, how am I going to get home? So I was just trying to remember the area and figure it out that way. And I eventually figured out how to get to my dad's old house. And from there, I knew how to get to the home. So I did. And I had to wear these funky sunglasses when I got home, and I wore them for hours, I remember, and yeah, I had to be like, yep, this is it. Now, the more that I've had Sjogrens, the more I've learned about it. The hives, that mainly is something, so you can test positive for 2 antibodies. The one I tested for can cause that to happen because of the sun. So you got to be careful. But that is my main diagnosis story. So how are you diagnosed? This goes into, so you're diagnosed with matching blood and symptoms. So you have to have both. If you do not have both, it is not a diagnosis. So you can test positive for 2 antibodies with Sjogrens. There's the SSA and the SSB. One is supposed to be secondary, which means you have it with something else, and one is supposed to be primary, which I tested primary even though I have it with endometriosis. I tested positive for the SSA antibody. And the thing with the SSA antibody is, again, the thing with the sun. You are more, not that this doesn't happen with SSB, but a lot of people with SSA, research shows that they are more prone to sunburn and to getting bad reactions from UV rays. And that definitely happens to me. I mean, I feel like a vampire in the heat. So what do? You gotta put sunscreen on, like, every time you go outside. Doesn't matter if you're out for 20 minutes, you gotta put it on. Unless you're only out for, like, 2 or 3 minutes, then, you know. But, like, if I'm out for an extended period of time, every time we go to the farmer's market, before we go, I put sunscreen on. You have to put sunscreen on. Now, I will say I've found in my own experience that mineral sunscreen works best. However, it is a pain in the butt to blend out, and it makes you look white because it doesn't fully blend out. So, like, I've noticed, like, I do the CeraVe one in the face, and anyone who's used the sunscreen knows exactly what I'm talking about. You will sit there rubbing, and it does not blend out. It makes you look paler than you actually are. Drives me nuts. But I'm telling you, it works. It works. So that is why I got hives, because that previous day I didn't wear sunscreen, and then it was getting worse as I was having to go outside to go to my car. So, yeah, wear your sunscreen if you got Sjogrens. So yeah, that is how you get diagnosed. What are the symptoms? So I'm only going to talk about my personal experience. The symptoms are different for everybody. I got very dry skin, and again, I got the hives. I got dry eyes, dry mouth, and also, like, dry lips as well, like chapped lips and things like that. So just your typical symptoms like that. And yeah, so things like that. And I don't know, I also had, that's right, I also had joint pain too. Yeah, I had joint pain. You can also, this more probably will happen out west if you live out west. The sun out west is a lot brighter than back east, and it's mainly because back east it's a lot more humid, so those clouds block the sun. It's a lot more bright, so if you have Sjogrens, you might get optical headaches, and basically, I didn't even know about this until I came out west, and it happened to me. Basically, if you're not wearing sunglasses outside, the sun will almost give you, like, an optic headache. And this did not happen to me until I came to live here, and I think it was the first week we were with Craig. And I remember I had this headache, and it would not subside. Oh, sorry, you guys. I'm yawning so much during this podcast. I don't even mean to. So that has been a problem. The other thing that happened to me this week is I actually feel a little under the weather right now. it's mainly because I got bit up outside, and my body is having like a very weird reaction to the bites that I got. And that can happen too, if you're in an area that your body is not used to or acclimated to. So, yeah, it's not fun. And so that's why I'm a little low energy today. And this is another autoimmune disease that you cannot see. So with that, comes a lot of things. I know for me, my first job, I took a lot of off time just getting diagnosed. And the scary thing is they said that first they tell you have lupus unless you know what you have. And that can be very scary for someone who doesn't have another autoimmune condition. I know for me, even though I had endometriosis, it was still very scary to hear that I might have lupus. Because I've seen stuff about lupus in the news, and it's tough. And so it was tough, and I needed good supportive staff. So if you don't have that at your job, now I will say my job, though there are a lot of stories I have, they were very, very, very supportive about this situation. But I'm more just saying this for people who maybe are in a job where they aren't getting that support. That could be very difficult because it would just be hard to be able to go to all these appointments. A lot of the time, these appointments could not be planned until the end of the day, and you had to leave early so that you could get there on time. So it's just a whole thing, and you really need a supportive staff. And the other thing too is, I think people don't realize, at a whim, at any moment, you could need eye drops. And because of that, for me, I carry a first aid kit with me everywhere. Another symptom that can be caused is actually acid reflux, which I didn't know. But that can be because your saliva is not breaking down your food like it normally would, because you have less saliva, and you can actually get dental issues from that too. So you got to really check in with your dentist and things like that. So yeah, you got to really be on top of a lot of things, and it's not the worst autoimmune illness, but it is an invisible challenge because you got to bring stuff with you in case of something happening, just so that you're prepared. So I always bring a first aid kit with me everywhere. A lot of people will say it's overkill, but you'd be surprised how much you actually use it. And yeah, I use it a lot. So I bring it with me everywhere. And so I always have my eye drops. I always have tissues. I always have stomach medication. I always have everything with me. What treatments do you use for Sjogren's? So again, this all depends on each person's individual case. Some people have prescription eye drops. I do not. I just use regular Systane eye drops. Now, I use the liquid ones during the day about 3 times a day, and then at nighttime I use the gel drops. And those are supposed to be thicker, so what happens is they keep your eyes moisturized for a longer period of time. So I do that for my eyes. For my mouth, for dry mouth, I use toothpaste. Another thing you want to look for, I don't have prescription toothpaste, but I just use ones with xylitol if I can. And then the other thing too that you can do is my dentist recommended that I use fluoride mouthwash, but the one that's alcohol free, because alcohol actually dries your mouth out more. And then xylitol is an ingredient that helps with saliva production. You want to choose gum that has that for treatment. I know it's, when have you ever heard of chewing gum for treatment? But I'm telling you, it works. There are also things you can get in the store over the counter, like drops that you suck on that have xylitol in them. I've tried them. I actually don't like them and find that it's harder for me to be motivated to actually use them. So I prefer gum. And there's a gum brand that's over the counter that has it in there, and it's actually ice cubes. So I get those. I have the raspberry flavor right now. It's amazing. And the other thing as well, I'm also on pilocarpine. That's a prescription that helps with saliva production. I am on that right now because I was talking to my rheumatologist the last time I saw her about coming here out west, and I'm in a dry desert environment, and I thought it would be important to have that in case. And it's funny, pilocarpine actually does help with optic headaches too, so it's nice to have, in case something like that happens. So I just take it as needed. And the other medication I'm on is for joint pain. So I actually did experience joint pain without swelling. And so I was put on meloxicam for that. So I just take it as needed when I need it, and that's the only time I take it. So I don't take it every day. And I actually think that it's good that I don't take it every day because I don't need it every day, and it's good to not need it every day. So those are my treatments. Treatments can look different for each person depending on, who they are. The other thing I would recommend is wearing sunscreen and regularly putting lotion on, and drink your water. But don't gulp it, and that's one of the things I struggle with. That's why I got put on the try-mouth medication. I would gulp it, and you don't gulp it. You're supposed to sip it every once in a while and slowly finish it because that helps moisturize your mouth. So those are the main things, and just take care of your body as you need it. And I recommend, honestly, I know not everyone will do this, but I highly recommend carrying a first aid kit. You do not know when you're going to need something like that on a whim, and it's better to have it with you than not have it. And it's tough because I will say it doesn't fit very well in a purse. A lot of the time I carry a backpack with me wherever I'm going. So I'm trying to get more decorated backpacks and things like that. So it's something I can be excited to use rather than like, oh, I have to bring this first aid kit with me and I'm dreading it. So I actually am getting there's a backpack that's supposed to ship here. I'm getting a little worried it's not going to come, but I got a one-piece chopper backpack, and I'm hoping it's going to come because it's really cute, and it'll be a good thing to throw my first aid kit into. I'm hoping it comes. I'm like not hearing about it, and it's shipping through USPS now, and it says it's shipped on Amazon, and it says pre-shipped on USPS, and Mom was telling me yesterday, anytime that happens, it means it's not coming, and I'm like, I hope not. I want it to come. So the last question that I have for today, can stress cause Sjogrens? So, not directly. That's what I want to say about that. I'm not a doctor, but I know for a fact from what I've learned from the pamphlets that my doctor has given me, stress can't directly cause it, but it can make it worse. Because think about it. When you're stressed, your body produces cortisol. That cortisol can make your autoimmune illness worse. So they always recommend when you have an autoimmune illness to stay as stress-free as possible. That is something that I'm trying to do, but I'm a very stressed individual, so it's a very difficult thing for me to do. And when you're stressed, it's very difficult to take care of yourself. It's very difficult to eat enough. It's very difficult to sleep enough. Those are things that I'm working on improving, and I have improved them in my time here. And I'm happy about that I've been able to improve these things as I've been here. Exercise is very important when you can do it, but don't push yourself too far. There are certain exercises I can't do anymore because my joints lock up or they hurt when I do them. Dance cardio is going to be an every once in a while thing. I probably will never do it like I used to, because there are certain dance moves that lock up my joints, and then I get the crack, and I'm like, ugh, dang it. I think 50-person classes, that's something I used to do too, but no more of that. I have a Y membership, but I just can't see myself doing that stuff because I never know if my joints are going to lock up or not, or if an exercise is going to be uncomfortable, and I can't really modify it or keep up with the pace of everybody else. So a lot of the workouts I do now are mainly through, like, I go to a Pilates studio that has a max of 4 students, and they have machines that you can use in order to do the different exercises that are joint friendly. And there was one exercise I remember I did the previous week where I like hurt my hip, and I think it was on like the 4th rep, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing any more of that. And the instructor was like, what happened? I'm like, I pulled my hip. And she's like, yep, no more of that. Let's do something else. So it's great to be able to change it on a whim with having that small of a class. So that's good. And it's almost like you have your own instructor with 4. And, you know, again, the machines are very friendly to joint problems. And the other thing is I've been hiking a lot as well. And swimming is also supposed to be good, which I tried. I'm not a very good swimmer, I'm going to be honest. But that is supposed to be good for if you have joint problems. So just things like that as well. Now, another thing I want to say before closing this episode that I forgot to mention earlier. Since these are autoimmune conditions, if you get a sickness on top of this, you're like immunocompromised, technically. And I actually got a sinus infection in February of this year, and it was like the worst. I was on so many medications because I had to be on the antibiotic, I had to be on a nasal spray, I had to be on meloxicam because my joints were hurting, I had to be on my birth control. Like, I was on so many medications and I was so exhausted. And so, yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Employers, when someone with an autoimmune condition gets sick, they're really sick. Like, really, really, really sick. And it's difficult to deal with and for their bodies to fight off. Another thing I would say too, at least from my experience, vitamins have helped me a lot. Vitamin C, I'm telling you, vitamin C and vitamin B12 and fish oil. I mean, mainly that one's for my cholesterol. It's a little elevated. And also my vision too. My ophthalmologist said you should take fish oil to treat this, just as an additional treatment. So I do. And and zinc. Zinc is supposed to be really good for helping autoimmune illnesses. And I mean, I just take it in my sleep vitamin. I have a sleep vitamin that's immunity boost, and it has zinc in it. So, I mean, there are so many ways you can throw it in. And if you hate taking the pills, you can take the gummies. I mean, I'm not here to judge. Most of my vitamins are gummies. So, yeah. But that is wrapping up with Sjogrens. If you have a request for a topic you want me to cover, please leave it in the comments. Thank you all for listening, and the GoFundMe will be posted in the description of this video. Please support with the Teamwork Wins website. Please also follow me on social media, and I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.